All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Strength Classroom. Today, we have a very special guest, a very requested guest. We have James from the Sweet Science of Fighting, all sorts of strength and conditioning stuff. If you grapple, you strike, you do MMA, he is a great source of information. How are you doing today, James?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for having me on. And requested, are you sure?
I think so.
I can hear the demons call when they do what they do. And now I feel like taking off, find a place with a view. The pain is never gonna stop if it's
All right, so how I start off with all my guests is just just a little small introduction, but with yours it'll be a slightly different question. Just what inspired your page? What inspired the way you train, the way you put out information? What started that? Just give us a little bit of your background.
What started that was probably COVID, to be honest, back then. So I spent my career working in professional rugby and rugby league and at professional international levels. Once COVID hit, we were stuck in Romania from April to December trying to get home. Contract ended there with the team. And I was like, shit, okay, I got to find a way to make money. It was online and eventually just felt combat sport. I've been doing jiu-jitsu since 2014, but it's just kind of been on and off with travel. And you know how it is when you're working with different teams and there's just no time to train. And then I just obviously just love that. So within that, I also was already producing a lot of content for like Science for Sport, which I still do. And then a bunch of other websites I was writing for. And I was like, oh, maybe I can just go into combat sports. You know, I love combat sports. I'm doing combat sports. Rugby is basically combat sports was running. And there was obviously a big gap because combat sports strength and conditioning it still is, but not as bad, relatively rubbish compared to a lot of other sports. I think just because it's relatively easy for someone online to get into, and it's relatively easy for a certain athlete to kind of just walk into someone's gym and then suddenly you're training a UFC fighter, right? And then that's your credibility that you're riding on. Whereas in other sports like rugby or whatever else, you can't just go and start training professional rugby players. You're contracted to a team and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how I got into doing that. And I just thought I would start spreading information on relatively sound training practices for fighters. And the funny thing is, like, a lot of it is general common sense, but because combat sports has been so, like you said, bastardized, it almost goes against the grain, which is probably what you've seen too. So it makes it, I guess, relatively, I'm not gonna say easy, but it makes it a little more, it stands out more in that space compared to maybe some other sports.
Sometimes I feel like I don't think it is common sense, to be honest, because sometimes I'll say something to someone, like the amount of people at my BJJ gym that I've introduced neck training to blows my mind how they don't already know that. Like if there's one population that would know that more than just the general person, it would be anyone that's in martial arts, in my opinion. And it's just the amount of people that have been like, oh, you can do exercises for your neck other than just like kind of going like this. It's like, yeah, and there's a lot of them and you don't have to do them all, but there's so many. It's low-hanging fruit, in my opinion, especially if your neck is untrained in just any capacity. But bridging off that, just in general, no pun intended, bridging. This is one area where I feel like we disagree. You're a fan of the Iron Neck?
I love the Iron Neck.
Yeah, see, not for me. I tried it and I don't know what model it was. Like it could have been one of their older ones, or I don't know if it was the top of the line one. I really don't, because they all kind of look the same to me, to be honest.
Mhm.
And there was just something about it I didn't like at all. Like I reviewed a bunch of pieces. I do say for just pure rotation, yes, it has the smoothest feel. It's not like when you're using a band where the more you turn, the tension intensifies. It's one solid tension. And when you turn, it's like 360 degrees. But what I didn't like, and I feel like it's just mainly from a marketing perspective, that they say you can train like all angles of your neck, which you technically can, but I don't feel like you can do like active extension and active flexion, just from the senses. Like
Yeah.
I was literally hearing it crack as I was doing that. And it's not like it's the cheapest thing in the world. So if I bought that and it broke, I would have been pretty upset. But I do agree, for pure rotation, you could even like rotate your whole body. There's no end. Whereas with a band, your end range of motion is kind of there. Have you tried any other like little neck tools? Because there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, I have. well, I have the iron neck, but I also have the neck harness, the iron neck harness. So as you mentioned, like I don't do neck flexion, neck extension, and all that kind of stuff with the iron neck. I do that with the harness. I also have a Spud Ink harness as well, like old one way back in the
Yeah,
day.
yeah. That was my first one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got that one too. So yeah, if I'm going to do like neck extension, even putting it behind my back and doing like standing flexions or something like that, I'll use those. And then for like pure rotation isometric stuff, then I'm on the iron neck.
Have you ever tried a neck flex?
I haven't.
That's a really good piece. You know who Mike and the Machine Bruce is?
Yeah, I've seen some of the stuff on Instagram. I don't think Netflix actually likes me because I wrote an affiliate article that was iron neck versus neck flex. And then I was just doing a comparison on iron neck being able to do a bunch more stuff. And then they sent me a cease and desist. So I have a feeling they don't like me, but you know, regardless, like I haven't tried the neck flex, but it'll be, I'm assuming it'll be very similar to the iron neck harness.
Yeah, I think that's why maybe you got the cease and desist, because I think the Iron Neck kind of copied their design to a certain extent. So I think maybe that's what tipped them off or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very similar build. It's very similar. So how this is, I think, not just with athletes, and I feel like even with the general population, how do you train an athlete to, specifically a combat athlete, to either increase their size or hypertrophy, just like traditional gym lifts, stuff like that, but by getting them to buy into it, that they're not going to lose speed, mobility, flexibility? How do you go about that approach? And more importantly, like explaining to the athlete that, hey, this is not going to happen.
Yeah, maybe I'll try break it down into a couple of different things. Like the first one is what most of your listeners have probably seen all over our social media anyway, is everyone's on the train of don't train like a bodybuilder, train like an athlete. I think that's like a trend right now, isn't it? So that would be, that would be one of the things, right? So you're not doing body part splits, you're not doing crazy volumes. Throw out the idea of optimal, quote unquote, training volumes for hypertrophy, because you're not training to maximize hypertrophy. You're just training to get bigger. For the sport of combat sports. So it means you're not trying to do 10 to 20 plus sets per muscle group multiple times a week, or doing some kind of bro split where you're doing insane amounts of volume. So that'd be number one. Number two, I would say, even just a common mistake is just the idea of not doing everything else you need to do and just doing straight hypertrophy trainings. The common ones, obviously, people won't do any jumps, throws, even just like Olympic weightlifting or anything where you're moving something quickly. So people will go into, okay, it's a hypertrophy phase, I'm going to get big, so all I'm going to do is dumbbell bench, rows, chin-ups, presses, squats, deadlifts, whatever it is. And they kind of neglect the other component, which is what you need to do to retain or get faster while you're adding size. So that's obviously like the biggest, I guess, probably the biggest mistakes regarding gaining size for combat sports and not losing the speed. And then it's just obviously keeping the technical training up. On top of that, I can go, maybe I'll go a little more specific on some of the stuff, so it's not just broad, big picture. So if you take a typical strength and size program, like I mentioned, squats, pushes, press, pulls, whatever, there's a couple ways you can approach it. Typically, if that's your main goal, it's good to do some kind of your speed, plyometric, whatever work at the beginning of the session. And that might be, say you're doing a general warm-up, or whatever you might do there. And then you might move into one or two exercises that are your, I guess, just kind of maintaining or just doing a minimal volume of it. So it could be some kind of like 2 sets of some kind of plyometric jump and 2 to 3 sets of some kind of throw. It could even be, if you do have the skills for the Olympic lifts, it could be some kind of weightlifting derivative. What's nice about the weightlifting derivatives is you can get some good size gains out of them. So things like snatch high pulls and stuff are wicked for upper back development. So you're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone with that kind of stuff too. And if you're doing that and you're making sure you're still touching on those qualities while you're trying to gain size, you're not going to run into those problems where you come out of an 8-week training block, you've added 10 kilos or 20 pounds to your frame, and then you can't move. And then you go, lifting weights doesn't work for me, so I'm just not going to train anymore, which I've heard people say before, which is crazy to me. And then regarding the flexibility and mobility side, it's making sure that you're doing your full range of motion lifts, because we know that you're getting structural change within the muscle to actually make long-term change in joint range of motion. There's a reason why if you're always squatting deep, you kind of don't lose, like you can kind of just sit down in a deep squat all the time. You don't lose it. Static stretching, unless taken to the absolute extreme, you don't make those structural changes in the muscle. So, which means you get the increased range of motion is typically temporary, and it's usually down to a improved stretch tolerance. So you're kind of just like tolerating that extra range of motion at that time, and it's mainly passive. So you can basically be put in that position, or you can get to that position, but you can't control it, as they would say. So those would be the main things. Hopefully I covered most of that question.
I guess it's not, but I feel like people take that a bit too far, where it's like you shouldn't do any hypertrophy
Yeah.
training. That's wrong, because like no one's gonna gain muscle too quickly. Like it's almost like competitive athletes have become what women think about lifting weights, where if they lift weights, they're going to look like a man and become all bulky. And especially if you are doing your technical sport as well, like that's basically built in. It's going to guarantee that you don't gain muscle too quickly. And I also feel like sometimes it comes from the fact you'll hear a football player, a basketball player, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, oh, these people put on 20 pounds of muscle in the off season. It's like, no, you put on 20 pounds of body weight. Because if the league knows you put on 20 pounds of muscle in the off season, you're taking a piss test the minute after you announce that. Because there's only one way you're doing that. Let's be honest here. Yeah. Are you a fan of things like just for mobility in general, but yes, for strength, things like Cossack squats?
Yeah, sure. I
Yeah,
mean,
I find that's one of
anything that's movement at the end ranges under load, like all good. And especially just general warm up stuff. Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, no, I find that's a great, that's one of like my go-to like strength slash flexibility, mobility exercises, because you can load it up quite heavy and still get that long range of motion.
Yeah. Yeah. My number one is ISO Bulgarian split squats, barbell versions, heavy 20-second holds. And I usually do that with 50, 60 kilos and just like a couple of sets. And I'll try to do that once every 7 to 14 days ish. And it helps just keep my knees nice, because they can get pretty banged up just from years of competitive sport and lifting and stuff like that. And I've found that you retain pretty good strength just even doing that. And it's solid. It's a nice one. You get a mad stretch down like your back rec fem, and it just like opens up your hips. It's super nice.
When it comes to tailoring programs for, let's say, someone's either a boxer or a kickboxer, so like mainly a stand-up person and versus a grappler, what approach do you take different?
So the biggest thing, the way I like to see it, is kind of just like on this little spectrum. Strikers being more, say, velocity or speed based, grapplers being kind of more force or strength based, MMA somewhere in the middle is kind of like a combined thing. I mean, if you think about it in rugby terms as well, you have very similar within rugby where you have backs that are more speed based, and those programs are typically almost like track sprinters in terms of the program that will come out of it. You get your front row forwards, which are the big fat guys at the front of the scrum, and those guys would be more heavy strength training based. And then in the middle, you kind of have like your loose forwards, which are kind of like a hybrid of those two, and they'll be like a combined. That's how we'll do it in rugby, where it's combined. And then in combat sports, kind of have a very similar outcome when you're kind of placing strikers, MMA, and grapplers. That'll be the main difference. Within that'll be the main difference. The programs wouldn't be too dissimilar if you kind of looked at them, but you may have more emphasis on the speed, I guess the speed training side within strikers. So you may have more volume. Say if you're sending out a program, say fast to slow, where you're going jumps, plyos, throws, some maybe kind of lightly loaded jumps, and then maybe your heavy strength training stuff, you'll end up having, got my daughter at the door, you end up having maybe more sets there and less of the heavy stuff, and you might have the opposite being done within the grappling side. Now, I guess you could say within striking arts, there is value in doing, say, heavier traditional strength training. I don't think it's necessary even, but I think it generally should be done just for some of the adaptations you're looking for. So touching it every so often is a good idea. But I think within that sport, you can get away with, I mean, the best athletes often are the best because they're the best at the sport, not because of the training they've done. And I mean, I'm sure you've seen plenty of athlete training footage and stuff with pro athletes and the way they train, and you're sitting there like, what the fuck are these guys doing? But they're the best at the sport, so it doesn't even matter what they're doing. And I've found, obviously, the elite guys can handle a shit ton of training and recover pretty quickly. So, it doesn't matter so much. But for someone who doesn't have that kind of skill level or isn't that elite, then you're going to come into the weight room and try not to fuck yourself up. Yes. Overall, is basically, that's how it kind of looks. Within the grappling world, you can get away more with, say, professional bodybuilding, powerlifting style programs. Obviously, depending on the style of your game and the rule sets. Obviously, now everything's moving to kind of like a fast-paced wrestling based rule set, so it's changing a little bit, but you can still play a slower game. You can still play a slower wrestling game depending on how you approach it. Yeah, you can typically get away with more bodybuilding powerlifting type programs, which is what you kind of see a lot of. At least what you see a lot of the top pro guys doing, at least through social media, and probably what a lot of grapplers end up doing anyway, because it's just relatively easy to get into. Yeah, and that'll probably be the main differences.
You mentioned how professional like fighters or professional athletes train.
Yeah.
What would you say is, and it's funny because you can't even really call it a mistake because their results speak for themselves. But for someone that's maybe an amateur and like looking at that and trying to emulate it, what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that professional athletes make in terms of their strength and conditioning?
Most of it is it's such a mixed bag of what they're trying to do, and they're trying to achieve multiple outcomes with a few exercises, or basically making an exercise into two exercises. Like you see it all the time, they're benching while doing leg raises and shit like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's usually that done in circuit format, and then lack of intent is the biggest one. So you'll see guys like they'll be doing some kind of circuit, but it's just kind of going through the motions and doing the exercises, and then just essentially doing work. And then I guess mainly on top, like what you'll see, at least in boxing, a lot of pro boxing is kind of exercise selection. Like a lot of it doesn't make sense in terms of maybe what you're trying to achieve out of a session for a boxer, which would be likely some kind of power development, some kind of rate of force development, or even just kind of maximal strength stuff. Often it's geared again towards high rep circuits, machine bodybuilding stuff, and just general lack of intent overall, even for those things. So it's basically like a bodybuilding hypertrophy program done poorly on top of it. So you're getting really nothing out of it except just doing more work.
It's like the worst of both worlds, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you agree that and I guess it's based on the pages I follow, that when it comes to strength and conditioning for, let's just call it MMA in general, that coaches are trying to get their athletes to do things that are too sport specific as opposed to just getting them generally stronger, more conditioned, et cetera, et cetera?
What have you seen?
Like I've seen people like shrimping while pulling a sled.
Oh, I think I've seen that one. Is that big dude? Or was that maybe there's a shit ton of
No,
them
no,
that
no.
do
It was someone. It was like on turf. I definitely wouldn't have called it.
Okay.
It's like they'll like sprawl with dumbbells, and it's like you don't really need the weight to pull you down to sprawl, and then you know what I mean? Like it's almost like you're sprawling too fast at that point because you're not even sprawling. You're just getting pulled down by the dumbbells. So it's like.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when people were like shadow boxing with dumbbells. I've never thought that made sense because sure, maybe if you're doing like any type of strike that's coming upwards, that's fine because you're pushing against the resistance. But if you're doing straight punches, gravity's going downwards. And then if you were to remove that weight, technically you're training your arm to fly up at that point. So it's like, fine, like, and maybe it's always existed, but we've reached this point where not everything has to mimic the sport. Like there's just general strength and then there's skills. There really shouldn't be once again, it would be the worst of both worlds. You're just doing work. You're just doing activity.
Yeah. And I think there is a place for specificity, but like that's not specific. Like the stuff you mentioned is mimicry, not specificity,
yes,
right?
Because that's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah. So there is a place, at least in my mind, there is this place for specificity. I think you can go general to, when I say specific, I'm not talking like it's the sport, but you can go say less general and then the sport itself. And for something to be specific to the sport, like it has to have overload. You have to overload some component of whatever it is. And that overload's either some kind of force overload, it's some kind of speed overload, some kind of technical overload, but there has to be there. And if it's not there, then you're just, functional patterns is probably the best example of what bullshit looks like, It's just, there's some funny stuff that they do and you're just like, how do these people have 1 million followers?
Yeah, no. I agree. When it comes to, let's say, peaking, let's say they have a fight or a tournament or whatever, what do you do? Do you reduce volume? Do you reduce amount of like strength and conditioning days leading up to it? What gets tapered off the closer you get to competition?
Yeah, all of it. Not the technical side obviously will continue on as is, and that will eventually come down. But yes, we'll definitely taper down. Funnily enough, one of the things I've often thought about with the tapering side is potentially we can do less than we think in that instance. And I'm not talking about, the traditional, okay, we train 2 days a week and, we'll continue training 2 days a week and we'll just kind of drop the volume a little bit and we'll just do power stuff. I think we can go even less. And that's just the paper I published as part of my master's. If anyone's interested, the effects of power force velocity profiling on and tapering in elite professional rugby league, I think it's titled. And we took a small sample of the guys at the end of preseason for rugby league. So if anyone's not familiar with like the NRL, they have like a 4-month preseason, right? So they go like November to end of February, and then they kind of start preseason games and things. So the last 3 weeks of that February, we took a few guys and they were doing 4 gym sessions a week. I would say moderately high volume-ish. And we took these guys and we took them down to 1 session a week, super low volume, high intensity. So it was like 4 lifts, 4 full body lifts, like 3 sets of 3 kind of thing, which is a huge decrease in volume from 4 sessions to that. And then they just kept everything else the same. They still did all their on-field stuff, skill work, conditioning, everything else. And we saw massive jumps in, I guess you could say, in terms of jump squat performance across the spectrum in terms of different loads, force, power, velocity, etc. Now, you could argue because of what they were doing leading into that, that is what kind of supercompensated, which is probably true, because we were trying to investigate something else within that in terms of the overshoot phenomenon with muscle fiber and kind of using that as a proxy. But regardless, I think that kind of opened my eyes to the idea of, maybe in terms of strength training, we could literally take a lot of that further away from a fight and still make, I guess, almost be fresher, but still be able to touch on the qualities that you need. So typically you might do 2 strength training sessions, 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out, even maybe 1 week out. And then the week of, you might do 1 at the beginning of the week. Potentially you could drop that down to 1 for all those weeks, potentially, or theoretically, I should say. And then regarding the conditioning, so I've talked a lot about on my podcast, the YouTube channel and the Instagram and stuff on sprint interval training. And I guess dispelling the misnomer around aerobic versus anaerobic, how there's no such thing as anaerobic, there's no such thing as alactic. These terms, they do not represent what happens when we're doing exercise, because you can't do anything. You're not doing anything without lactate, because we're both sitting here producing lactate while we talk. And then all exercise uses oxygen. Even if you're doing a 6-second sprint, you're going to use oxygen while you do that. Anyway, maybe we can talk about that in a bit. But at that point, you're still doing some sprint intervals all the way through. And the volume's so low on those sprint intervals that there's not much to taper except taking a session out. Because you're doing like literally, like the entire session is 5 minutes, maximum 10. And the actual work time is like 1 to 2 minutes. But the intensity is so damn high, you make some mad conditioning gains doing it. And it fits well within combat sports, especially within a fight camp period where maybe you're sparring more often, your technical training intensity and volume is going up. If you can do something that only takes you 5 minutes and the intensity's there and you're going to get the gains that you would if you were going to do.
Okay. That makes sense, because I
might have gone off tangent. I might have just gone through a shit ton of too much stuff.
No, don't worry. It's better to be more detailed than less sometimes. Because I feel like that the qualities you've built up leading up to that fight camp, let's say, like the end of it, they're not just going to disappear in that 1-2 weeks before the fight. So you've still built up strength. Would you say it's like almost just doing literally, like, let's say you need to hit 50% of your ability. You're like literally hitting like 50.1%, just enough to stimulate, get the athlete moving to like maintain those muscle fibers that they might have built. Is that kind of the idea going into the last couple of weeks?
Yeah. And I mean, I think people forget that everything you do is strength training. Strength training, is it Franz Bosch's quote? Is it strength training, or is it maybe it's Vern Gambetter's one? Strength training is resistance training with, I completely butchered it. Something about coordination and strength training anyway. But everything you do is strength training. So if you're grappling, you're strength training, right? You're striking, you're still doing strength training. You're still producing force against whatever it is at different speeds. So you're still hitting those qualities in your technical training. You're just trying to maybe overload them within that strength training session that you're doing in the gym, because you're having a more stable implement. You're able to do it in a more controlled environment, etc. So at that point, you may be just doing some kind of jumps, even throws, plyometrics. Maybe you're touching some really low volume, like heavy push, pull, and maybe some kind of squat. And that's kind of the session. Relatively easy in that.
That makes sense. When it comes to training until failure, do you think that's okay? Now, I'm not talking about like a squat or a lunge or any of those big compound movements, but taking something like, let's say, a band push down or a set of curls. Like, do you think there's any benefit into going until like the athlete starts like really, really feeling it?
Yeah. You're just giving me layups here from my Instagram post. So everyone check out my Instagram for that. Yes, I think there is some value for doing that. I don't think you need to do it all the time. And the small muscle groups, like I'm sure everyone who's trained biceps to like a few sets of failure, yeah, you might be a little sore, but it's not going to affect things too massively. But yeah, it was an interesting paper. I think it was Raffalo and his colleagues in 2023. Eric Helms, I think, was on that paper too, and they were essentially investigating proximity to failure to see, if going to failure versus 2 reps short of failure led to greater increases in muscle growth. And it's like, okay, I think the finding them was you can do either or and you can get similar gains. But what was interesting out of it was the failure group had better fatigue, or attenuated fatigue better during their tests. So, essentially maybe doing some kind of curls, lateral raises, push downs, whatever it is for your arms to failure every now and then, may help you in a grappling context for, squeezing, isometric stuff. I mean, it could be just down to the idea that it's, you're creating, I guess, peripheral adaptations to have better work capacity, reduce fatigue, etc., similar like you would when doing some kind of like bike sprint.
Is that the paper where they told people to get a weight they would do 10 reps with and go to failure?
No, I think that one's different.
Oh, okay, because I
I think this
reference
was
that
a
all the time.
meta-analysis. No, sorry, it wasn't. No, but what paper was that one?
Okay, I can't remember who wrote it, but I wish I did. It was like they took a group of, I can't remember if it was trained or untrained. It was probably trained. And they got them to do bicep curls and tricep extensions. And they told them to get a weight that they would normally do 10 reps with and go to failure. And the average amount of reps done when they went to the average was 17. So it went to show that sometimes people don't actually know what like reps in reserve is, or RPE or whatever. And as you were saying that study, I was like, is that who wrote it? Like, am I finally going to get to know who wrote that paper? Because I just
this one they controlled for the RPE on this one, so they actually had subjects predict, and then they did the actual and then compared them to make sure it was.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. No, that sounds like something different. But I always talk about that when I tell people, like, okay, just because you did a set of 10 and you started feeling, let's say, slowness on rep 8, just because you do 9, 10 and it's somewhat slow, if you really want to push it and then end it there, like that's your last set, you might even be able to reach, like, let's say 15. But the thing is, I think too many people save sets, especially when it comes to things like bicep curls, tricep extensions. Like sometimes all you need is 1 to 2 sets if you push it. Now, I would say the opposite might be true in this context for combat athletes when you're doing squats, deadlifts, whatever. So I feel like you either want to max out, do like a heavy single, or do a lot of submaximal sets just to kind of get yourself through the motion, get enough strength in there. But I find like never you're going to give an athlete, no matter how far they are out from a fight, it's like, okay, here's 4 plates on deadlifts. Go until you can't anymore. Like that's pretty.
Here's the 20 rep squat program.
That's pretty irresponsible at that point. But for the smaller muscles where it's not going to zap the shit out of your recovery, I feel like you said, maybe every 3rd week, every 4th week, whatever, when you feel good, there's definitely some value into throwing that in there every once in a while. I notice you've been talking about this lately. It's like sprint training versus zone 2 cardio. Now, this is ignorance on my part. I feel just because I see it talked about so much. I don't even know what zone 2 cardio is really, but I just see it talked about endlessly, no matter, even whether it's I follow someone or they just pop up on my feed, someone I will see it at least 2 to 5 times a day talking about zone 2 cardio.
Dude, it's crazy, man. I think just because like Huberman and all the big fitness influencers have pushed it like to the max. And then from there, it's kind of permeated its way down into, I guess, online coaches and sporting coaches and stuff like that. But before I go to this, I'll have to give credit. Like Dr. Andrew Usher and Dr. John Babrai really are the ones that kind of changed my entire thinking on this. Kind of almost been like mentors to me in terms of like the conditioning information. Because at one point I'm not saying I'm in the zone 2 boat, because we never did say low intense. We'll just call it low intensity steady state cardio to make it easier. But I wouldn't do any of the kind of low intensity stuff in professional rugby because you just don't have time to do that. It doesn't make any sense, or it doesn't make any sense either for a 120 kilo prop to go for a long run or bike or whatever it is. So you do other means and methods. But where should I start this? So let's just say low intensity steady state cardio. You've got in the middle more high intensity interval trainings. People can think of maybe like long intervals and short intervals. So long intervals might be like 2 to 5 minutes long, whereas short intervals may be like 15 to 30 seconds or even 10 to 30 seconds long, and they're not done at maximal intensity. For anyone who may be familiar, it's typically programmed off velocity of VO2 max, which another word for it is like maximal aerobic speed. I think it's probably the most practical and easiest way, and it's actually a relatively good method to use to individualize your programming if you're not sure what to do with, say, a high intensity interval training approach. Is you just do like a 6-minute time trial, or if you're running on a track, you just do 4 laps. Ends up being a 1 mile run, 1,500 meters. If you're on like a bike or a rower, you would do a 6-minute time trial. You literally take distance you covered in meters, divide that by the time that you did the time trial in seconds. So for 6 minutes, it's 360 seconds. And that gives you a number. Does that make sense? Hopefully. It can sound confusing when when I'm talking.
I'm just trying to follow the math. Yeah.
So you take that number, you divide it by that, and you get that number you get is represented of maximal aerobic speed, or the highest speed that you reach at VO2 max. And typically it's around like 3.5 to 4-ish for most people. Typically you'll see like pretty well trained team sport athletes in the 4 to 4.5, which translates to 4 meters per second. And that's how you design your intervals with it. So if you're doing say 100% of your maximal aerobic speed, which would be say your 4 meters per second, you're doing a 15-second interval, you'd do 15 times 4, which is 60 meters, and 60 meters would be the intervals you're covering in those 15 seconds. Then you can play around with interval lengths, you can play around with rest lengths, you can play around with the intensity of the interval, so you can go 110% or 120%. Yeah, there's a shit ton of stuff you can do there. If anyone's interested, if you just search Dan Baker MAS, there should be a PDF that pops up on Google that kind of goes through everything on how to set it up and do it. It's a pretty good approach, I think. But back to zone 2 and sprint intervals. So as I mentioned before about, anaerobic, alactic, they don't exist in exercise because we're always producing lactate, we're using oxygen. And one of the interesting things around conditioning, if you look at it on a spectrum of low to high intensity, where your low intensity steady state cardio will be your low intensity, going for a jog, talking to a mate while you're jogging. Sprint intervals, like, holy shit, man, if you do sprint intervals properly, like, it nails me every time. I mean, I'm sure there are fitter people that can do them and do a bunch of other things, but for me, damn, man, they crush me. And that's the kind of intensity you're looking at. And it's 1 to 2 minutes of total work. So that's kind of your two opposite ends of the spectrum. And within that spectrum, because the most important thing, just like in all training, nothing happens in isolation, right? So we have dumbass functional patterns people talking about just training fascia. It's like, okay, good luck isolating fascia somehow. But you have the spectrum, and on that spectrum, you typically have more, say, centrally or peripherally biased conditioning. And what I mean by that is, say, you have conditioning that maybe more targets adaptations at the heart, and you have a conditioning that targets more adaptations at the muscle. So when we're talking about centrally targeted conditioning, it's typically lower intensity, say zone 2. And that's why they talk about eccentric hypertrophy of the heart of the left ventricle. I can deliver more oxygen per heartbeat. That's why zone 2 is the best cardio you can do for combat athletes, because I can now deliver more oxygen. The more oxygen I can deliver, the more the better I can recover, the more work I can do, the better I can keep my lactate levels low while I'm doing, the better I can keep my heart rate level low while I'm fighting, etc. And I have more gas left in the tank. Unfortunately, in reality, that's probably not what happens. Yes, the delivery aspect, of course, again, nothing happens in isolation, right? So delivery aspect, of course, is important. You're still getting peripheral adaptations even on that end of the spectrum, but it is likely that combat sports, well, actually most sports, likely aren't limited by oxygen delivery. And there's a few ways we can look at that. The first one is just looking at general VO2 max values from various combat athletes, because VO2 max is heavily influenced by, heavily influenced by the central function. So basically, if you're able to improve delivery, VO2 max typically is comprised mainly of that component. And if you look at like the VO2 max values of pro boxers, wrestlers, judoka, all that, you're looking at like 45 to 60 milliliters per kg per minute in terms of absolute VO2. If you look at elite endurance athletes, you're looking at above 70. And these are like triathletes. I mean, I think in one paper was even sub-elite triathletes that were above 70 in that paper. So you're talking VO2 max values far, far higher. Whereas combat athletes, you would say, if you're going to rank them based on VO2 across the spectrum, they'll be like moderately trained. There's actually a good paper that shows like they group them by performance level. And if you look at, say, 45 to 60, you're looking at athletes that train anywhere from 2 to 3 hours a week up to, I think it's like a couple of hours a day a few times. I can't remember what it was now. I have to double check what it was, but it wasn't a huge amount of training. It was basically, if you work full time and you go and train combat sports most days of the week and do some strength training, you probably fit into those level 1 and 2 performance levels, which would be where these fit. Whereas level 3, 4, and 5 are the elite VO2 max levels. So that would be one of the reasons why potentially VO2 max isn't a great indicator of performance. The other one is, I shared a graph on my Instagram and YouTube where you see the heart rate where VO2 peak occurs on that graph. And then it also shows muscle oxygenation data. So essentially the muscle using the oxygen during an incremental treadmill test, which would be like a VO2 max test. And you see that when VO2 peak is reached, there's still like another couple of minutes at least of increased performance. Heart rate still going up, muscle oxygenation still going down. So there's still plenty left in the tank after that. So even when you reach VO2 max within exercise, you still got more left in the tank. So, is VO2 max that much or that good of an indicator within sports like combat sport? I mean, even with elite endurance athletes, you're looking at other things as well. So those will be the big ones. Then when we actually look at sprint intervals on the other side of the spectrum, we can dial them in really specifically. We've been going through a conditioning mentorship as part of, so I teamed up with Dr. Andrew Usher. We have performance.education. We've been doing a conditioning mentorship with a bunch of coaches, which has been awesome. We've almost finished the 8 weeks and going through how to dial in. I don't want to sound like it's not like we're just like, it's just sprint intervals. It's not just sprint intervals. It's just the idea of using a tool like you would in strength training, right? If you're trying to get as strong as possible maximal strength, you're not going to go start lifting kettlebells and dumbbells. You're going to use barbells because that's the tool that's going to allow you to get there. So this is the same thing here, using sprint intervals as a tool to be able to target or better target these peripheral adaptations at the muscle. When we're talking about peripheral adaptations, we're typically talking about mitochondria. And obviously the mitochondria is another buzzword within the zone 2 crowd, like, hey, we do zone 2 because we have to do mitochondria, blah, blah, blah. We see more time efficient and we see better mitochondrial. Okay. We see more mitochondrial content or greater mitochondrial, I say biogenesis in terms of the number of them with sprint interval training versus endurance training and high intensity interval training based on the hours trained. It ends up being more efficient. You can train less and you can get more mitochondria essentially. Now, on top of that, you have improved mitochondrial function within like the first few sessions, which is pretty crazy. And by mitochondrial function, we're just talking about how well it, quote unquote, switches on and off. So we want it to switch on quickly because we get a better or a sharper decrease in muscle oxygen use, and then a faster resynthesis or a faster resaturation of oxygen on the way up, so we're able to recover faster. That's what everyone wants, right? Everyone wants to be able to recover faster after a round, after high intensity efforts, but we're all told to do more low intensity cardio because we need to improve the heart's ability to pump oxygen, but it's limited by the ability of the muscles to use that oxygen to resaturate between rounds. And this is why sprint intervals are such a potent tool, because you get that sharp improvement in mitochondrial function and you're able to switch on and off relatively quickly. And then you start to see shapes that look more like V shapes on these graphs because you're getting these sharp desats or desaturations and then sharp resaturations. And that's why and by doing that, it shows that you're able to, I guess, to put it really simply, you're able to work really hard and you're able to recover really hard. And you can do this over and over and over again versus trying to, I need to stay in this zone. I need to make sure I keep everything down. If I spike up, I think we're all probably taught or told, as soon as you get above this heart rate, you're now anaerobic. And now you're going into your anaerobic energy reserves, and that's only finite. So we can't be in there too long. So we have to come back and, try to keep it as long as possible, or delay it as long as possible. Whereas we're finding that it doesn't really matter. It's just how quickly you can get to these peak heart rates or peak whatever it is, and how quickly we can come out of it. And we can design sprint intervals to be able to improve certain parts of those curves so we're able to do that. And I think the biggest, I guess you could say, not like wake up, but the biggest thing you'll find is if you start doing sprint intervals properly, I think you understand or realize how you cannot reach these intensities in sport training. You just can't. There's zero chance you'll ever get to the intensity that you will get on, say, an air bike doing, 10 or 20 second sprints. There's just no way. And you've had hard scramble rounds where you just like gassed afterwards. Nothing compares to banging out. Even just doing we have a baseline test protocol, which is just 2 sets of 30 seconds with 60 seconds rest in between. So it's basically 2 wing gates. Holy shit, man. If you're not used to doing hard sprint efforts on the bike, and when I'm talking like hard sprint efforts, I don't think many people realize what a hard sprint effort is, because you can see on Instagram, hey, you do 10-second sprints or 30-second sprints on the bike, but you're going to do 8 of them. I saw that the other day. I think it was like, hey, you should do this conditioning workout. It was like 30 or 40 seconds times 8. And I was like, if you're doing these properly, no chance.
Yeah,
There's no chance. You will be on the floor after the first few.
kind of like doing a
that's
lot
how
of
intense they're
sets.
going to be.
It's kind of like doing a lot of sets of, let's say, bench pressing versus fewer really hard sets.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
if those sets were really hard or they're going to make you grow or get stronger, you wouldn't have been able to do 6 of them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
idea.
And yeah, it's basically you're trading volume for intensity. And, you know, everyone understands kind of that inverse relationship in pretty much all training. So you're trading that and you're getting these adaptations. Now, one of the common pushbacks against a sprint interval training approach is that, hey, if you look at the research, you know, VO2 max, anaerobic capacity and stuff, they all cap out after 3 weeks, which they do. If you look at the original Tabata study, for example, have VO2 max caps out at 3 weeks, so it doesn't go any higher throughout the entire 6 weeks. Anaerobic capacity, same thing. If you look at another 2017 study with Yamagishi and Babra, I think it was, same thing. 3 weeks, VO2 max caps out with these sprint intervals. There's 2 ways of kind of looking at that. The first one is, you know, within these studies, they don't change the sprint intervals. You're doing the same thing. Like if you went to the gym, as you know, and you're doing a 100-kilo squat, you do a set of 5, and then every week you do the same weight and same reps. At some point, you don't adapt because you've adapted to that load and there's no heavier stimulus. So that will be one thing. The other thing, and I should actually add, yes, you do get VO2 max improvements from sprint intervals, even though, again, nothing in isolation, right? We're still getting some kind of central function. But what's interesting, if you look at the Yamagishi Babrai paper, you see time to exhaustion on their test continues to increase to 9 weeks, even though VO2 max capped out. So they're able to exercise longer, even all the way through, even though that VO2 max didn't go up, which is another reason why VO2 max might not be a good indicator of performance. So indicating that, hey, maybe peripheral function is improving still all the way through, even with the same sprint interval. So I lost my train of thought now in terms of what we were covering on that thing. But basically, yeah. So you can do these sprint intervals and you can manipulate them. We manipulate them based on heart rate kinetics, which is basically how the heart rate line is moving, because that's the most simple. Most people have a heart rate monitor, whereas not everyone has sensors for muscle oxygen and power data from bikes, etc., etc. So we do most of that from heart rate. But essentially, we're looking at the slope and shape of curves, and not just how many beats things are moving. We're looking at how the curve, I guess, how the line fits with the mathematical model in terms of the slope. So we're looking at different portions of, say you're doing a 30-second sprint, and you can see the line, maybe it dips under the slope, then over the slope, under, and it'll kind of wave its way up. And you'll see that as, say, a slow or fast component of these heart rate kinetics. And typically at the beginning, most people, including myself, because, you know, I'm not some pro athlete sitting here doing all this training, but you'll have like a slow, what we call on kinetics or on phase, which is basically just a work interval. And you'll have an initial slow with the heart rate, and then eventually it will come up and it might be fast and it might be slow again. And the idea is you can dial in these intervals so specific that you can target, say, that initial phase to be able to get everything to kick in faster. I mean, one thing is to kick in faster because we don't want that delay from when basically that delay before the mitochondria switch on, quote unquote, and starts to, we'll call it, use muscle oxygen. Because the longer that delay, I guess you could say, more oxygen debt you're in. So faster VO2 kinetics or fast oxygen kinetics is a better sign of fitness. Is correlated, I think, with VO2 max as well. So having a high VO2 max isn't something to shy away from, but it's potentially not just something you should just go and blindly try and improve. Performance is the better indicator. So you can forget about all this fancy tech and fancy all this bullshit. If you're just performing better, if you're able to do your 30-second sprint at a higher average power output, if you're able to do your 1 mile run at a faster time, that is what really matters. You don't need to get bogged down in all this unless you just, you know, want to nerd out and shit like that. Or maybe if you're coaching other people and want to nerd out too. But otherwise, it's just, you know, you can pick any of those and just kind of do something to get better at it. Hopefully that run ended up with something semi-decent.
So because of just the intensity of the sprint intervals, what would the minimum amount of days per week be that you would, I guess, prescribe? And what would the maximum be, if any, really?
1 minimum, 3 maximum, typically. So if you're trying, if it's like, if conditioning is like, hey, I need to get my shit together, you'd be doing 3. if you're kind of just like, I guess, quote unquote, maintaining, but you're not really maintaining, right? You're kind of still improving. You're looking at 2. And then if you're just kind of keep holding on to it while doing other things, you might be doing 1. But typically two is a good spot to be in. Ideally 3 would be where you want it. But yeah, it's tough. I guess the other question on those as well is you got to have the right modality to do it. I had someone ask a question the other day, like, can I do 30 seconds of kettlebell swings, 30 seconds of push-ups, 30 seconds of battle ropes? And then, it's like, unfortunately, you can't. And the reason is, one, the cadence, both reasons, the cadence and intent aren't high enough for you to get the intensity you need for the sprint intervals. Because anyone can run to the gym and do 30 seconds of kettlebell swings and then walk off and then go do 30 seconds of something else, like the circuit that was proposed. Whereas if you're doing a 30-second of a hard air bike or bike sprint or whatever it is, you're not going and doing something else. You're on the floor maybe for a little bit before going anywhere else. So you can use spin bikes, air bikes, but you need decent resistance on the spin bike. Air bikes, if you don't have any of those, hill sprints, 10-meter shuttle runs is the other option that Dr. John Babray mentioned, where you can get similar muscle oxygen desaturation patterns as a bike. So sprinting 10 meters, sprinting back, back and forth for a lot of time. Typically, just a general prescription for maybe like the general athlete or general population who wants to do this. It's 6 to 30-second work intervals. You're doing a total of 1 to 2 minutes of work, and you're doing a 1 to 2 to 1 to 8 work to rest. So, for example, if you're doing a 10-second sprint, you're either doing 6 to 12 of them. That will give you your 1 to 2 minutes. And then you're obviously doing 20 to, 80 seconds rest. Typically 80 seconds rest is probably too long for that kind of thing. But, 10 to 60 seconds rest for those. Typically you're looking at, at least what we've found, or what I've found for maintaining, I guess, performance or power within that, you can go probably like 1 to 1, 1 to 2, 1 to 3 is pretty tough. But once you get 1 to 3, 1 to 4-ish, it becomes a lot more manageable. But ideally you want to have those relatively short, because you want that stress. You want that stress throughout, and you're going to be blowing after the first one, and you kind of just got to go and do it for the next one, unfortunately.
Okay. Wow, as high as 1 to 8?
Yeah, that's the general prescription. I mean, I think that's more for Gen Pop. So that'll be like the general prescription across that. For the athletes, like for example, in our conditioning mentorship, we typically won't go much higher than 1-3.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, so it just gives a wider range for general population to work within.
Just maybe outside of the role of strength and conditioning, but I guess it plays a part in it. Do you feel like when it comes to cutting weight in MMA, it's kind of, no, I don't want to say it's gotten out of hand, but sometimes it can be really out of hand? And do you feel like amateurs tend to copy that?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously gotten better. There's a lot of guys that are coming to the space now that are, I guess, bringing sound practices to combat sports. Obviously, you still have the cowboys going around and maybe fighters doing it themselves and things. I mean, most of them, at least in the UFC, they have the UFC PI. So, I mean, they have access to everything for free there. So it doesn't make any sense for a lot of UFC people to have those issues. One championship has their own issues, I guess, with the hydration testing and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. When I first heard about that, I was like, huh.
Yeah, they can still be cheated as well. So that's, but, I guess they're trying to do something there. But yeah, I mean, in general, I think awareness is getting better and the information's getting out there, but you're still having people, like come fight week with way overweight and sitting in saunas and doing that shit for hours on end, and then not realizing that it's going to take a toll. The thing is, I think as well, you have a lot of leeway in professional MMA, like do you see that? You have a lot of leeway because you're weighing in like Friday morning and fighting Saturday night. So you've kind of got like, you got a bit of wiggle room. Like still, it's not going to be great for you, but you've got wiggle room to kind of get back on track after that. Whereas if you're weighing in 2 hours before, or mat side in jiu-jitsu tournament, I mean, there's people that still cut weight for jiu-jitsu tournaments and they're weighing mat side before going on.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. I can't remember who I saw do it. I want to say it was Gleason Tebow. Now, I don't know what it was, but he walks around like 45 pounds heavier than what he fights at. And I'm like, damn, like I know you're a professional, and I know they probably don't care, but doing that repetitively has to take years off your life. And fighting probably takes years off your life as well. But I just, like, there's some weight cuts that are so drastic. The first one that comes to my head when it came to weight cutting is Anthony Johnson. Because when I was first started fighting, he was a welterweight, and then when I saw he came back to the UFC, I'm like, that's a different person. Like, and then I realized, I'm like, wow, so he used to be so sunken in because he cut so much weight. Like it made so much sense. But I feel like there's some guys at my gym that are like, oh, I have to cut 20 for my competition. But it's like, you're like, no disrespect to them. If that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. But it's like, you're fighting for also like a $5 trophy. You're not going to worlds. You're not going to nationals. You know what I mean? Then I could see it's a different story, right? But it's like, you're fighting at a tournament that I could qualify for, and I haven't been to any yet. So it's like you're essentially at hobbyist level, but you're taking it, I don't want to say taking it so seriously because that's a good thing, but there's just no reason to be cutting that amount of weight. Like you're passing another weight class. It just makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty nuts. Pretty nuts what goes on. There's an interesting case study by James Morhen when he was Rocky Fielding. I think he published it as well, and he shows the weight changes over 5 years from weight cutting. And I think it was him and Dr. Carl Evans as well. But they've talked a lot about the idea that after each weight cut, your body fat set point increases. So essentially, after each weight cut, you're getting fatter, and that's why it becomes harder and harder and harder. You're just storing more body fat, especially obviously. And I mean, his cuts weren't that extreme. I think he was like maybe 88, 89 kilos Rocky Fielding, and then down to 81 kilos for the actual fight. And it's not like cutting all that weight on fight week, you know, he's like 83, 82 by the week of the fight. And then it's just a really simple like water drop or whatever it is there. But yeah, he basically shows data where just getting slightly fatter every time with the weight cuts. And I think that's why you see a lot of fighters after their careers, you know, start to blow out a little bit. I mean, obviously they're not training as much and all that kind of stuff too. But yeah, it's one of the factors, which is pretty interesting and kind of like makes you think, you know, is doing a lot of weight cutting the best idea?
What would you say now? If there's no answer, that's fine. But what would you say is like either for yourself or what you kind of guide clients to do? What would you say is the best like recovery tool? Now, I don't want you to say like lie down on the couch or stretch or whatever, like things like an ice bath, a sauna, massage gun. Like I know some of those, there's some people that do everything under the sun. And then I feel like they're not recovering just because they're so worried about, oh, I have to get my 10 minutes of this, my 10 minutes of that in. And then it just becomes another mental stretch. But if you could pick one that you think would basically right away make the difference in someone's recovery and how fresh they feel, what would you think that is?
I'm going to disappoint you and just say, don't overstretch your training. Because most of it is you're training too much, too hard, and then obviously you can't recover. But I will entertain that question with, it depends. Okay, let me put it in two parts. For me personally, massage. Love it. For, I guess, let's say it depends based on where you are in your training schedule. So I think of recovery, external recovery modalities, and that just means sauna, ice bath, etc. You can periodize like you would periodize training. And that's typically what I used to do in rugby, because in rugby, it's really simple. You have a team, everyone wants to, you bring massage people in, you have whatever, ice baths everywhere. But because we're in a preparation phase, say in the preseason, I don't want them to get into external recovery modalities because I don't want to artificially remove the stress and the signals from the training. So in those phases, it would be maybe massage once a week or whatever it is for those players. Now, if you're in a quote unquote fight camp or, 8, 12 weeks out, whatever it is, then you can start going to town. And the reason I like that is because yes, you're still going to get adaptations from your training. Just because you hop an ice bath doesn't mean you suddenly removed everything and nothing happens. So you're still going to get that. But the recovery modalities become novel, and obviously novel things. For example, I'm sure yourself and a lot of listeners, like you start a new exercise in the gym and you start to make progress really quickly on that exercise. Hey, I was benching this much this week. Now next week I'm doing this much, because it's maybe a new bar and maybe you haven't incline benched in however long and you're making progress on that, or it's just a brand new exercise. Same thing in my, I guess, opinion, theoretically, from recovery. And then within that, I guess, fight camp period, my choice would be ice bathing. Now, obviously, ice baths have been, I guess, poo-pooed or shunned recently, I guess, but that's how it works, right? Everything kind of pendulum swings back and forth. And honestly, shunned, yeah, I can understand. But within like a heavy training schedule, when you're training, maybe multiple times a day, oh my gosh, look at this little gremlin that's coming here. If you're training multiple times a day and the technical training and sparring is your most important part of that, then using external recovery tools like ice bars can help you perform better in those. It's a really, really good study. Probably my favorite ice bar study by Dr. Fran Tavares. He did that when he was doing his PhD in New Zealand with one of the rugby teams there. And essentially they took in the preseason, they took the squad, so if anyone's not familiar with rugby preseason, it's pretty brutal. I mentioned the NRL one, it's very similar. But they were training, say, I think it was 2 to 3 times a day, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And they were doing, I think, 16 total sessions a week. So it was like gym, speed, conditioning, field stuff. At the end of each day, one group ice bathed and the other group just, did normal stuff, didn't do that. And what they found was the ice bath group attenuated the decline in jump performance. So essentially, they didn't have a sharp decrease in jump performance at the end of the week like the non-ice bath group did. Did that make sense? Hopefully that made sense. Yeah. So essentially they were able to perform better at the end of the week because they were in the ice bath a week, where the group that wasn't in the ice bath didn't perform as well in the jump. So theoretically, if you take those findings at face value, if you use the ice bath often within a fight camp, by the end of the week, when maybe you're doing a lot of sparring, you should be able to ideally perform better in those scenarios versus if you weren't using that recovery tool. So that's when I would use something like an ice bath often and regularly. In the out camp, it would just be like you wouldn't even worry about it.
I got one for my, just put it in my deck in the backyard. And
yeah, nice.
Up until maybe mid-January, it was okay. I'd say early January, and it would get to about like 0 degrees, and I noticed once
Wait, is that 0 Celsius?
Celsius,
0?
yeah.
Yeah.
I always forget. And so, but then came to a part where I have to like smash the top because a layer would form. And then I got to it one day and I was hitting it. I was using a sledgehammer and I'm like, why is it not breaking? And then I felt the side and it wasn't one of those cheap little circle ones. Like it was a blow up one, but it's enough to fit 2 people comfortably. The whole thing turned into an ice cube. Because we had a really cold winter in Canada this year, but it's got to be, I can't remember how many gallons, but I think it's in the 3 digits. But it's the biggest ice cube you'd ever see. So I wasn't able to use it from like mid-January to, I think if I were to go outside today, it would have been at least I could break the top. But I like it specifically. They say to do it in the morning, but the only problem is that's when I lift. So I don't want to do it afterwards because I don't want to cool myself down after heating myself up, right? And I don't want to do it before because then it's going to take me an hour to warm up. So I tend to, when I do it, I'll do it kind of before-ish when I go to bed, or jujitsu's normally in the evening. So I'll do it right when I come home, just for a minute, just enough to shock my system and whatever, and get the endorphins running and whatever. I do find it helps me sleep better if I do cold at night.
I used to do that with my players when we had to travel. Say we'd travel to another city to play, and we'd be at the hotel at 10 p.m., 11 p.m. I would set up an ice bath in the hotel rooms, in the players' rooms, and they would do the ice bath and then go to bed just for that exact reason. Because it does something. I don't know what it is. It just works.
I find you get this like spike that wakes you up, but then you start coming back down pretty quickly. And I feel my eyes get a little bit heavier and
and
you
get into a warm bed, I think, after being cold or something like that.
Yeah, it has some nice like therapeutic effect. And I like how you can actively feel your blood going back to your extremities. And it's almost like you're getting like
you get pain in your feet and hands. I can't even handle that.
Like, I remember my wife, the first time she saw me do it, like when it was at 0 degrees, she's like, your feet are so red. Like the part that my extremities were like a beet red. It was crazy. I think the longest I stayed in, I think it was like 2.5 minutes, almost 3 minutes at 0 degrees. But that was like, I'm talking to myself at that point, not to get up. Like, it's not like I kept myself down there. I'm like, no, just 10 more seconds. And I'm like shivering underwater. Like that was the longest. Most likely if it's that cold, I'll stay in for a minute and a half. And then I'm just like, okay, that was good enough. But that one time I just wanted to like push myself, see how far I could actually go with that. But it's nice. It's fun at the same time. The hardest part is just going in. Like, it's not something you dip your toes in and whatever. Like, I put both feet down and then I just fall. Because the more like milliseconds you are above the cold water, it's happened to me many times where I'm like, okay, I just have to get out because I've already kind of psyched myself out. Whereas I just got to get in on one shot, because then every second your body is half in, it's another second that you're talking to yourself and going, oh my goodness, this is cold, right?
Yep.
You just got to jump.
And you
right
can't
in.
You can't slowly dip your balls in either.
No,
It's got to be quick.
that's my tipping point. That's my tipping point. Once I get there, I'm good. When it comes to just whole setting up like the sweet science of fighting, your whole page, your whole business, what has been the most like rewarding part of that?
I think, I mean, even what you told me before the podcast, people coming to you and asking you if stuff's going to be, like Sweet Science of Fighting, or people coming to other coaches at various conferences asking about things that I've posted. That's been probably the most rewarding so far. I mean, we've got a few fighters on the training app as well. Some that are trying to push into the pros, and that's been really cool to kind of help them throughout their journey as well. Because the thing about the training app, I think why I put that together, because I started with just standalone programs, which is cool. You kind of give the program and that's kind of it. And with the training app, I wanted to be like, okay, you get the program, but then I'm there and you can kind of talk to me, and you need something changed, or something's coming up, a fight's coming up, I can help you. So I've been helping a few of the guys in there, if they have fights coming up or whatever, just modifying a few things and giving them something that they can use going into that. And that's been really good, having fighters enjoy the programming from that too. So that's probably been the two biggest ones.
Oh no, I'll save that for rapid fire. So how do you stay on top of your personal training while coaching?
Very challenging, but with two kids as well. But we're, I want to say, lucky enough that we both, my wife and I, love training. So she was training for the Olympics, for the 2020 Olympics. She's like a Commonwealth medalist in Olympic weightlifting. So she's been an elite weightlifter for 20 plus years.
That's pretty recent.
Representing South Africa. So she's been at it for a long time, international medalist in all sorts of competitions. And I was a competitive weightlifter back home too, obviously not to that level. But we love training. So we train together as much as possible. And then when I can get to jiu-jitsu class, I'll go. Like I went today, which is lucky because my daughter fell asleep earlier. So it's just, I'll try and go when she's sleeping, usually midday class. And then everything else is training most other days of the week, and it's usually lifting. And right now decided that we're going to maybe train for a weightlifting competition. So I guess outside of combat sports competition, I did a couple of jiu-jitsu competitions before the little one was born, a couple of super fights. That's the nice thing about the super fights here in Austin, because obviously Austin's like the mecca of jiu-jitsu. They have like super fights, pay-per-view cards all the time, like pay-per-view jiu-jitsu, like random. And I just put my name in, I just fight on the undercard, don't have to pay any entry fee. Fucking sweet. But obviously, as well in Austin, you get like a lot of the guys who are pushing to go, like, obviously now jiu-jitsu became more professional, guys that are like hardcore pushing to go pro. So you see like both events I competed at, I see someone's knee get fucking ripped apart. I'm like, dude, I'm a dad of two kids and shit. I don't need some motherfucker coming trying to heel hook me because he's trying to fucking earn $100 at some competition, like like I think I might get back to it, but or competing in jiu-jitsu, I should say. I'll probably get back to it at some point, but right now, just looking at doing some weightlifting for a bit of a change.
Yeah, that's also been my, I guess the word is reservations when it comes to competing. Number one, I don't feel like I'm good enough yet, but that's a bit hypocritical because I always used to tell people when I was competing in powerlifting and they'd be like, I'm thinking of doing this, but I don't feel strong enough.
Yeah, and you go, you
And I
have
would
to do
say,
it.
listen, dude, you're never going to feel strong enough. So to me,
Yeah.
it's just replace the word strong with good in terms of jujitsu. And I'm like, I feel like I'm having this conversation with a younger version of myself. But also, if I could find one that I don't even mind the drive, like if it's just a little bit further away, but one that maybe is like an open house at my gym or something. There's even one, the only reason I can't do it, it's like the week before I get married. But my wife said, if you enter that and you get hurt, you're never hearing the end. So we've already had the conversation about cauliflower ears. She's like, yeah, I'm never taking a picture with you ever again if you end up developing bad cauliflower ears. So she's like, as soon as you start feeling them puffing up, you're wearing the earmuffs or whatever, or we're never being seen together ever again. But to me, it's like, even in training, I don't mind if I tap too late to a choke and I go out, oh, big deal, whatever. I have 4 brain cells or whatever. When it comes to like arm bars, knee bars, like ankle locks, whatever, those, I'm like, as soon as I feel even a moderate amount of pain, like the pain threshold, it's like, what's the point of not tapping? This is not for anything. This is not on the line. But the thing is, in the gym, people are nice to you. No one really cranks things. Whereas in tournaments, different story, right? So it's like, that's one thing that's always been my main reservation with competing, even though people are like, oh, Peter, you should compete. It's like, okay, I will one day, just not right now.
I think it depends on the organization too. If you're doing like IBJJF, then you're probably going to be fine. But like So the gym I train at here, Val Jiu-Jitsu, it's just submission grappling. So it's only they have some gi stuff, but it's mainly just no gi, and it's just submission grappling and stuff. So it's just, you can reap and do all that stuff. So we train all that, which is awesome. I love it. But that's basically the same rule sets for most of the competitions around too. It's like there's like no pop-up gi competitions. It's all no gi. You got Thursday night jiu-jitsu down at 10th Planet. You've got Enigma series here that's always around Austin too, at the different gyms as well. They now had like the World BJJ World Championships, they called it, which is just at Val as well, which is just like, because a lot of the top guys live here anyway. So there's just tournaments popping up, or competitions popping up all the time. But it's all those same rule sets where it's kind of like, do you want to go up with some hungry 18-year-old who's trying to like prove a point? It's like
when it comes to you and the sweet science of fighting, your business, whatever, where do you see yourself going in 5 years? What do you have any plans, things you're gonna release, or anything like that that's on your mind, or just goals you're envisioned?
Just continue to grow the app. The biggest thing is kind of like the spin-off of performance.education with Dr. Andrew Usher, because we're doing more. So I think Sweet Science of Fighting is more fighter based, and then our performance education is more coaches based in terms of coaches education. So that's like conditioning course or mentorship, and that's going to spin off into courses, webinars, potentially some kind of in-person conference stuff, but it's going to kind of be linked back still with Sweet Science of Fighting, because that's where I share all the information. So I'm almost like cross-pollinating those two together, like Sweet Science of Fighting athlete-based, build that training app, give training, I guess, affordable training to fighters, right? Because like $37 a month is different to paying some guy $300, $400 a month or more to do their training in person. So bang, have that, then have the coaches stuff as well running, which is kind of linked to it, but different at the same time. So yeah, those are the two main ones. We have Lift Big Eat Big as well with my wife, which we acquired in like 2021, which is more strength sport based. So like weightlifting, strongman, bodybuilding stuff, and that obviously it's harder for me to do in terms of like content and growing, because yes, like I enjoy training and being a meathead, but like my true passion is in sports performance. That's what I care about. And obviously the general fitness space is just fucking rammed with just people on juice talking bullshit, and it's kind of like,
And to be honest, just promoting things that don't work.
Yeah. And it's just, whoa.
They look a certain way, people buy it.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about how you look and what you can do versus knowledge in that space. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's cool. We'll do some stuff in there. Yeah, you got your yogurt. She's got a protein yogurt. She eats all that protein. Eh? Yeah. But yeah, so that's pretty much the three big ones, I should say.
All right. So almost done. We do like a rapid fire round where it's either the questions are this or that, or ask you a question. And it's very short answer, 1 to 2 words, whatever. And then I'll give you the opportunity, 2 to 3 minutes. You could have a sign off, promote something, whatever you want. And then we'll be done. Striking or grappling?
Grappling for me.
Gi or no gi?
No gi. All day.
Deadlifts or squats?
Squats.
Kettlebells or barbells?
Barbells.
Favorite martial arts movie?
The Raid, if you want to call it a martial arts movie. Have you seen The Raid?
I'll have to check that out. I don't know what that's about.
It's an Indonesian movie.
Okay.
It is the most violent martial arts movie you ever watch. It's legit.
What year roughly did it come out?
2013, I think. There's The Raid, and there's The Raid 2, I think, was in 2020 or 2019 or something like that. Both legit.
Okay. Training in the morning or training in the evening?
Morning.
The last book you read from start to finish?
Shit, I haven't read a book in a while now. With running all these businesses. What did I read last? I don't remember what I read last. It's been that long.
I'm reading a book called 40 Laws of Power. It's not like I'm exposing the world.
What's his name?
It's a pretty good book.
What's the author's name again? Is it Robert something?
I think you're right. It's a red and blue book if you have it on your shelf.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good book. Your favorite post-training meal?
Cereal, low-fat milk, and a protein shake.
What is the most overused cue in lifting?
Overused?
Yeah.
Sit back with the squat.
People do take that a bit too literal.
Yeah.
Or think if sitting back is a good cue, then sitting back as much as possible is even better. So yeah, I'd agree with that one. The most underrated exercise with the most low-hanging fruit specifically for fighters?
Bike sprints.
Would you rather coach a world champion or be the world champion yourself?
Coach.
If you...
I wasn't never able to experience higher level. I think that's all of us as coaches never experienced high level competition because we became coaches because we were so shit.
Yeah, it sounds self-deprecating humor, but it's true most of the time. It's true.
Yep.
When it comes to if you could pick any combat athlete, past, present, whoever, to coach, like they have no choice but to make you their coach, who would it be?
Oh my gosh. That's a hard one. Who would it be? Dude, I can't even think of anyone. I can't even think. Hey, why are you laughing? I have no answer for that one. I
Okay,
cannot
this
even
might be
think of
easier.
them.
Your favorite fighter to watch, current or all time?
Favorite fighter to watch? Probably Israel Adesanya. A bit of touch of home in New Zealand. My wife is standing here laughing because she's South African, so she's like Drickus all day.
I have a funny story then. There's this guy that teaches at one of the gyms I go to jujitsu, and I have always thought he was South African, so I never even asked him where his accent was from. This is like 2.5 years I've known him. He just told me the other day he's from New Zealand. I
You mix the New
swore this
Zealand and
guy
South
was South
African accent now?
African the whole time up until yesterday.
That's hilarious.
I'd like to think I'm pretty good with accents, like ones that sound the same. Like I feel like I can pick out the difference between a New Zealand and Australian accent, but I was floored when he told me he wasn't South African. Okay, you kind of already answered. Actually, no, you didn't. Ice bath or sauna?
Depends on the purpose
What is a supplement that you actually believe in, not just because of the hype?
that I actually believe in. Well, creatine. Okay, when I say actually believe in, compared to other supplements, would be creatine. But in terms of the actual magnitude of performance improvement from them, it's pretty low across the board.
What, let's say barbell, typical, it doesn't have to be barbell, but typical strength training exercise you dislike doing, but you still continue to do so because you know there's immense benefits from it?
Bulgarian split squat, bent over row. I hate both of them.
And I noticed that you do Hatfield assisted lunges and split squat.
Yeah,
Those
love that.
are they're such a good
So good.
exercise, such a good because I used to work at a gym and I used to tell my manager, but everything had to be run through the city and whatnot. I used to say a safety squat bar would do wonders here, even for the older population, because something about a straight barbell, it's hard to balance. I go, a safety squat bar would do so well, but stupid city, you have to buy from some website and this and that, and they're not going to approve it, but they approve all the other stupid decisions that they put in. I think I know the answer to this, but your favorite sport besides MMA?
Okay, can I say, let's see, favorite sport to watch
Oh, sure.
or sport to do? Sport to watch? Dude, it's been changing. It's been changing. Like, I don't mind watching, like, I enjoy watching rugby, but I'm not going to say that rugby is like my number one choice anymore. Like, I actually really enjoy watching just plain jiu-jitsu, funnily enough. So I'm going to go with that.
Okay. If you had to pick a walkout song, what would it be?
I actually had a walkout song when I did the super fight.
What was
it? It was David Dallas, who's a New Zealand rapper. And dude, now I just blanked on the song. That's so bad. How do they do that? Let me just, that's so bad. I feel like a bloody fraud now. Okay, I'm gonna pull it up right now. David Dallas. And it was, oh my gosh, it's in here. It's in here. Caught in a Daze by David Dallas.
And last question. One word to describe your training style, or two.
Logical.
Logical. Okay, I like that. All right, so now that's the rapid fire. This is how we typically end. So when I have my guests sign off, I just say 2 to 3 minutes. Yes, you can promote something, leave that near the end, but just something, it could be training or otherwise, that you feel is a great message. Maybe it's a mantra, maybe it's something a mentor told you, something that you feel that people would benefit just from hearing.
Main thing I think is leave something in the tank. And when I say leave something in the tank, we're talking typically strength training, because with these sprints, it's pretty fucked up. But typically leave something in the tanks. You should mostly feel, obviously depending on what you're trying to train, you should mostly feel like you've done the session and you could literally go and start doing your technical training. If you do that most of the time, you're going to be in pretty good nick going forward.
So like live to lift or fight another day, typically.
Yeah, I guess. Oh yeah, you summed it up and made it like a legit Instagram quote or something.
All right. Well, thank you, James, for joining me. This was a great conversation. To my subscribers out there, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to my channel. All of James' links will be in the description of this video. If you're not already subscribed to him, that's going to be a great way to find him. Once again, James, thank you for joining. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, class is dismissed.
Thank you.
I can hear the demons call when they do what they do. And now I feel like taking off, find a place with a view. The pain is never gonna stop if it's controlling you. I know that time can heal it all, I just gotta get through.